And then Milt got to thinking, well, we're so successful, we need to start a national organization. And he had met Bob Sparks in Maryland, and Bob wanted to start one also. They had individually met Jim Transu in California and met with him, and Jim wanted to start a national organization. So the three of them met at Abbey Delray South, at Delray Beach, Florida, in 1995. After a NaCCRA meeting, they met and discussed forming a national organization and agreed to form it, and they were going to call it the National Coalition for the Preservation of Resident Capital.
Oh, yeah, I saw that on one of your information sheets, yes.
So they agreed to go to New Orleans for the ASA meeting, and they called Emma Krebs in Pennsylvania, who was the Pennsylvania state president, and Harry Groves, who was the North Carolina state president, and asked them if they would like to attend. Whether they did or not, I don't know. But anyway, at the New Orleans ASA meeting, Bob Sparks was elected as their president. And they floundered on how to go, and their initial idea was they were only going to have state associations. And they felt that they could organize all the states within 2 years. Well, it never happened. And they wasn't making ground, so Bob wasn't working on getting them a charter, and so in 2000, or either 1999 or 2000, they elected Milt to replace Bob. And he immediately got a lawyer in Baltimore, Maryland, to work as their volunteer attorney. He volunteered to give them 40 hours a year, and after that, they would pay him. And he got them a charter in the year 2000. They got IRS to make them not-for-profit, tax-free. And
that was October the 14th, right?
Yeah,
2000, yeah.
2000.
Now, how long had the Florida organization been operating before the national?
10 years.
10 years.
Okay, they started in 1990.
Yes, thereabouts.
Okay.
And that's what,
when you hired Bennett.
yeah, that's what makes both NaCCRA and NaCCRA so strong, is they were both actually really started on the east coast of Florida. And there were some very strong, dedicated men and women leaders of it that got it going. Well, they got donations initially. That's what they operated on. Or they paid their own expenses to travel. And luckily, Bob Sparks was a very wealthy man. Milt Brummer was not that wealthy, but fairly so. And all the other leaders were, you know, reasonably well-off people. So they operated out of their own pocket. We had the Secretary of Treasury here, and he didn't have any money, so people would donate money to him where he could travel to do the NaCCRA business.
Wonderful. Was that Walt?
Well,
Now, how much, your $225,000 budget, since you're mentioning money, how much of that is dues and how much is donations? Do you know?
most all of Florida is dues. Very seldom we get a donation because we're not a 501c3. We're a 501c4.
Oh.
They did that deliberately because they wanted to do heavy lobbying because we didn't have any laws and they wanted to make laws.
But NaCCRA's a 501c3, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, and they started out with the premise, we don't want federal regulation. And that was because of the strong Florida influence, because they seen that they were going to have good state laws. and they didn't want the federal government messing with it.
Yeah, well, we could
Well, I
probably
can
use
see
the
that.
NAIC, but to get national, that's a better way to get it than to try to get federal laws. I think you and I
Now,
would agree.
we've had some close calls federally. I don't know where any of you remember a Florida senator named Bob Graham,
Mhm.
pretty active guy. Well, we have two people at Ingleside by Rock Creek that dabble in politics. They like to keep check on the U.S. Congress. One day, one of them found an attachment that Bob Graham had added to a bill adding $10.50 bed tax to nursing home beds throughout the United States.
Mm.
Because they found that,
Gordon Hawk.
Gordon Hawk found it.
Mm.
We were able to kill it before it ever got out of committee.
Mm. Now, you had Claude Pepper down here too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he get involved with any of this?
Excellent supporter of what Blackwell was doing.
Mm.
Before we leave this, what was the vision that you had for both organizations, or now really for NaCCRA? How did you see us?
Me, when I come along, Milt recruited me to go on the NaCCRA board my second year out here. And he had been replaced, he'd just been replaced by a guy named Art Burrell.
Yeah, from
in
Massachusetts.
Art thought the way to expand NaCCRA was to give membership away. And that's what he started doing. And it really looked good on paper, but he still didn't have no money. He couldn't print a newsletter, he couldn't do anything. And so he asked me to see if I could come up with a way to help membership. And he wanted to work on getting state organizations. And I convinced him that what we need to work on is get individual members and get them supporting us. And if you wanted some bigger ones, we could work on communities, but let's work on individual. So I started recruiting, I was doing consulting work then, and got to travel all over the United States, and got pretty well paid for it. So it was easy for me to visit, and so I was up in the college in Virginia, and so I said, well, I'll just go to a few communities in Virginia while I'm up here. Well, I found a lot of members, but they didn't pay dues. And they didn't intend to pay dues. So I called Art and I said, what's all these free members? He said, what are you doing in Virginia? Don't go there recruiting? I said, well, Art, where do you think I ought to go? He said, well, let me send you a list of where I don't want you to go.
Sorry.
Okay.
You know, and Art was a good guy, and I'm not belittling him at all, because you know he was trying to save a sinking ship.
But what would he have had the association do with non-paying members? What could you hope to accomplish? Or
Well,
what did
he
hope
thought
would
if he
happen?
gave it to them that they would renew, but you know we wasn't doing anything to cause them to
I was going
renew.
to say, why would they have to renew?
The only thing we had done up to that point, they got one federal bill passed, and that was a return to your nursing home from the hospital. Now, it's on the federal books. That's mandatory, that your community must take you back in their nursing home when you leave the hospital. But it's never been enforced.